While I was reading Man's Search for Meaning, a Nietzsche quote really hit home. He who has a why to live can bear any how. Hat man sein Warum des Lebens so vertragt, man sich mit jedem wie. This holds true for life's purpose, but I realized it holds true for patient care as well. In my own life, I spent way too much time in pediatric wards with pneumonia, Lyme disease, and bone grafts. The one thing that made one day better than another was being told the why of a procedure or test that was going to be done. It gave my childhood mind a framework within which I could relax into. It put the suffering, pain, and fear into context. The why is a navigation tool which gives energy to will and purpose. Today, I'm going to give you the why of chronic pain within my own clinical framework, because once you understand the pattern, your experience starts to make sense instead of feeling random. Then I'm going to give you some tools and adjustments to learn and implement to help yourself while you're in that suck that is chronic pain. Let's get started. Most people think chronic pain means damage, but clinically, that's not often actually what's happening. Pain can stick around long after an injury is healed or show up without one at all. And when you follow how it develops, it doesn't start as something complex. It starts simply with pathway 2, spinal and brainstem gating, where the signal begins to get louder. So at first, something happens. An injury, a strain, or an irritation. The body responds normally. But in some cases, the signal doesn't stay proportional. It starts to amplify. Movements that should feel mild begin to feel sharp. Pressure feels exaggerated. Small inputs trigger big responses. And this is where people start to notice, hey, this shouldn't hurt that much. At this stage, the system is still responding to something real. But the pain volume is already higher than it should be. Then it moves into pathway 4, and the system starts losing its ability to calm itself down. As that amplified signal continues, the internal braking system begins to fatigue. The body can no longer settle back to a baseline as easily. Pain lingers long after activity. Recovery takes more effort. Sleep may start to change. People begin to feel both wired and exhausted at the same time. And this is the point where pain is no longer just about the signal. It's about the system's reduced ability to regulate it. Then the pain stops resolving and starts to persist. And we're into pathway 3 being now engaged. And the system begins sustaining the pain through inflammatory feedback loops. Over time, something shifts. The pain no longer tracks cleanly with injury or activity. It becomes more constant, more present. Even when nothing's happening, it's still there. People often say, it just never goes away. At this stage, the system is no longer just reacting. It has begun to maintain the pain itself. Finally, pathway 1 is engaged. The body's state now drives pain through shifts in vagal tone and parasympathetic regulation. As this continues, the body's internal state starts to shape the pain more than the original injury ever did. Stress, environment, emotional load, even subtle physiological shifts begin to influence symptoms. Pain spreads, it fluctuates, becomes less predictable. People notice it gets worse when I'm overwhelmed or I can't relax out of it. At this point, pain is no longer localized. It's integrated into the body's overall state. So that is the why of chronic pain. This progression is not random. It follows a predictable pattern. First, the signal amplifies. Brakes weaken. The system begins sustaining the pain through inflammatory feedback loops. And finally, the pain starts depending more on your state, your stress, sleep, and mood than it does on the actual activity. And once all 4 are in play, pain no longer behaves like a simple injury. It behaves like a system that's lost regulation. Now that's the clinical side. But the same principles can be applied in a much simpler way. You don't need needles to begin influences these systems. You can access many of these same regulatory pathways through targeted acupressure using a toothpick at specific points on the body. And if the pain is a problem of regulation, then small shifts in how the system is regulated can start to change it. There are 3 places you can begin. The first is to reduce excitatory load. And one of the simplest way of doing this is by lowering your sugar intake. When sugar intake is high, it drives instability in energy regulation and increases excitatory pressure in the system. Simply put, sugar increases inflammation. That makes it harder for inhibitory systems to do their job, and this keeps the system in a more reactive state. A practical target is to keep total daily sugar under 20 grams. Anything with a label counts. Count the grams. For example, fruit doesn't count, but fruit juice does. Secondly, check and improve your vagal tone and autonomic state directly by shaping how your pain is experienced. If your system is stuck in a more sympathetic on-edge state, pain thresholds tend to drop and recovery becomes harder. I have a simple vagal tone check you can do on your own. I'll link that video and the accompanying blog post that I have on my website below. That'll give you a quick way to see whether your system is able to shift into a more regulated state. And if not, where to start. Now the third, targeted acupressure. This is where things can become very direct. You can begin influencing these same pathways through pressure at specific points on the body. The key is not just where you press, but why you're choosing that point. Once you recognize whether your pain feels like amplification, persistence, poor recovery, or stress-linked fluctuation, you can start selecting points that match that pattern. Now, let's get into how to find the most effective spots for your pain and how to use a toothpick to activate them. Okay, so for chronic neck pain, what we're going to be doing is finding tender spots along and through here on this border of the trapezius. What you're going to want to do, you find a tender spot and then try moving your head around. And what you want is a point that when you're pressing is both tender, but also helps relieve the pain or gives you bigger range of motion. Then that's the point to be doing the toothpick technique in a spiral along that point, because you'll find a number of tender spots in through here, but what you want are the points that when pressed aren't just tender, but they also help with either range of motion or with pain. You'll be doing the same thing along in here in these muscles, the scalenes, and then also look up in here that lower border of the clavicle. Again, you'll find tender spot, move the head around, see if it makes it feel better. If it does, then you do that spiral technique with the toothpick. Okay, so for chronic shoulder, we're going to be looking in through here along this plane of the pecs. You're going to be looking for something that's not only just tender, but when you press on it, either helps with range of motion or also with the pain. And then you're going to be doing the spiral technique along those spots, however many you find. Then you're going to be doing along this plane here. And then in the back, top of the scapula, can't really reach that spot to see, but you can press along in through here, and then when you find a spot that's not just tender, but when you press it also helps with the shoulder pain when you put it in range of motion, and that'll be a spot that you then do the spiral techniques with. Okay, so for knee pain, what we're going to be doing is checking on the inside of the calf and through here, and we're going to be looking for points that not only are tender when you press them, but they also, when you press them, they help with either range of motion with the knee or with the pain. And so you'll find a tender spot that does that, and then you go in a circular motion like that, find another one, and do that. Then you're going to look for my favorite point, spleen 9. So you go along the border of the bone right here, and it makes a little curve. And in that curve, that's spleen 9. And again, you do a little spiral. Then you're going to be coming up here to the thigh, and you're going to be looking for, again, tender spots on that inside of the thigh. That's going to be liver meridian and kidney meridian, and find spots that not only are just tender, but also help with pain and range of motion. And then you'll do a little pokey. So that's what you can do on your own. Now, here's what a trained acupuncturist can do with much more refined tools. Through this same lens, acupuncture isn't just acting on just one part of that system. It's restoring regulation across all four pathways at the same time. Across high-quality studies, the results are clear that acupuncture changes how the system regulates itself. At the level of the spinal cord and brainstem, it reduces signal amplification. At the level of inhibitory control, it strengthens the braking system. At the neuroimmune level, it reduces inflammatory reinforcement. And at the level of the autonomic system, it restores state regulation. So instead of trying to override pain, acupuncture restores regulation across the systems that generate it. Instead of trying to fight the pain, acupuncture helps you take the body back control. And it works because the pain isn't random. It follows a predictable pattern. It's a cascade. Glutamate rises, GABA buffering weakens, norepinephrine becomes unstable. Dopamine signaling fluctuates, serotonin and acetylcholine begin to strain. Neuroimmune signaling starts to increase, and as vagal tone drops, the system loses its ability to relax and reset. Understanding that pattern, your experience starts to make sense instead of feeling random. And it means you're not stuck waiting for it to change. You can begin shifting it yourself through the exact tools we just walked through. Now, if you're dealing with pain that hasn't made any sense or hasn't responded the way you expected, this is the model I use clinically. If you want help applying it to your specific situation, you can reach out to either set up an in-person session or a video consult. Or if you'd rather start on your own, use what we've covered here. Check your vagal tone and try the toothpick acupressure. That is a solid place to begin.